Foundation and the India International Center, we welcome you this evening. This evening is a special evening because we are launching a much awaited journal of the Raza Foundation. On many occasions I have been asked to launch journals myself, and I have advised most of them that if you can help, don't start a journal. So I am almost being unethical in launching a journal because we believe that we are launching a journal which covers something which is normally not covered. So we have some kind of a justification. It's called AROOP. Hopefully it will be a biannual. I can tell you that it took more than a year to put together the material. There are not enough writers on abstraction. So it was difficult and persuade, and there are friends here who almost gave us the material in the 11th hour. But we in any case are the 11th hour people. So everything happens at the 11th hour, everything comes together, etc. There are hardly any times in human creativity, imagination and history when everything got into shape, was adequately articulated and found some form or the other. Across time, arts, poetry, philosophy have been struggling to give shape, form and meaning to the world, to human experiences and relationship, to the inevitable chaos and darkness that the world always contains. They may not have fully succeeded, but their struggle towards form and meaning has been an act of noble and inspiring courage. Our times, if anything, are perhaps more fragmented, enormously more confusing, though the means and technologies of integration and clarity have been proliferating. Singularities of modernity, ideology, art practice, philosophical exploration, etc. have disappeared, or at least been unseated by furious, passionate, rigorous pluralities. Many of these pluralities, while they are active, have not given names and locus. They are AROOP. A crucial enterprise of arts, poetry and ideas in our time is to acknowledge this situation and to proceed to embody it in its amazing complexity. As a journal, we are focusing on this AROOP, which is sometimes visible, at other times invisible. Also, due to many historical reasons, mistaken steps, mutual lack of understanding in the Indian situation, arts, poetry and ideas have more or less stopped talking to each other. Even though they share the same anxieties and dilemmas, the same endeavor to give root to the ever-evasive AROOP, the same crisis imagination and significance, they sadly do not share these with each other. The much talked about interdependence of the arts and literature is almost wiped out from the active memory of the contemporary artistic efforts. AROOP is attempting to create an open togetherness, an invitation to know each other, a call to see how much is common while acknowledging the differences both of medium and individual vision. Our focus, oh Lord, our focus is on abstraction, which is supremely human phenomena. In the current climate, when the narrative, the realistic seem to dominate, it is important to recognize that there is a lot of art, music, poetry, architecture, photography, dance and cinema in which emerges a deep, agonizing and highly creative quest of embodying the AROOP of our times. AROOP would also be explored intellectually in terms of its long tradition in our aesthetics and theory. The Raza Foundation, established and funded by the major Indian master Syed Raza, is publishing 3 journals. Samas in Hindi, devoted to literature and civilization, AROOP Now, and in future, Swar Mudra, devoted to criticism of classical music and dance. The issue which will be released by 3 masters, Raza, Krishan Khanna and Arpita Singh, has the following contributors. there is a special section on V.S. Gaitonde, Rubina Garrode, Akhilesh, Manish Pushkale, Shan Khanna in conversation with Ina Puri, Anish Kapoor in conversation with Nicholas Baum, Mukund Lat, Bagi Shuk, Suresh Sharma, Charles Korea, Kumar Shahani, Rahab Allana, Prerna Shrimali, Gautam Chatterjee, Udayan Vajpeyi. Again Ina Puri and Zarina Hashmi, Bhavna Kakkar, Ranjit Hoskote, Peter Helly, Sven Rutiken. I hope you find this list impressive enough. May I now request the three masters to come and release, and then we'll follow a panel discussion on exploring abstraction. But I must acknowledge that this has been possible due to the tireless effort by the painter colleague Manish Pushkale. But for him, this journal would not have come out on time. But he was the 11th hour man, in fact. And there have been others who have helped us. One of them has forbidden me from mentioning her name, so I thank her anonymously. But the other one, who's our copy editor, Sonal Parmar, who's perhaps not here, so thank you very much, Sonal. And that's how the journal has come in. And may I now request Raza Sahab, Krishan Khanna and Arpita Singh to release the journal. We have modestly priced it, 300 rupees, and we are giving no complimentaries to anyone.
I think it's a great honor for me to release a document of this nature and of this kind. And even though I foresee that in future there will be slings and arrows, of course, which will be directed to us, all for the good, of course. I would say one thing. I'm reminded of Nooneen Rashid's little line, which says about masters, as we've been nominated and called. He says, "Khuda na kare ki master ji na ban jaye." With that hope, on behalf of everybody, we release this wonderful document to all of you.
May I request GEETI Singh, ASTAD DEBOO, Udayan Vajpeyi and ATUL DODIYA to please occupy seats. And as you can see, since the inaugural issue of our group is on abstraction, we thought it would be interesting to have a panel to discuss exploring abstraction. And we have four very distinguished people on the panel. ASTAD DEBOO, who is a renowned, internationally renowned dancer, but his international renown is really based on the number of performances that he gives in the most prestigious international dance festival. He is the Indian face in most of them, and he has experimented in many ways, starting from classical and traditional dance training to evolve his own style of contemporary dance. And he's been an old friend. He's experimented with visual arts, with Drupad music and whatnot. We have ATUL DODIYA, who's proudly for us a Raza body, who's having a big show in the NGMA, and we're very happy. He has also experimented a lot with abstraction in some sense or the other. We have Dr. GEETI, the well-known art historian and art critic. She has been the chief editor of India International Center Quarterly and was until recently the director of the Indian Cultural Center in Kathmandu. And we have VAJPEYI, who is my youngest brother. He writes poetry like me, better of course, and has written film scripts and loves arts, teaches physiology in a medical college. So here we are, 4 of them. The rules of the game are that each one of them speaks to you or speaks to you while showing something. That doesn't mean that you can take more time than 15 minutes. So 15 minutes, and then if they have anything to say to each other, then they would have some opportunity to do that. And after that, it will be open to the House for comments and clarifications. So may I start with Dr. GEETI. You can do it from there, or you want to come here? Thank us. Don't waste time on thanking the Foundation for such an initiative, etc., etc. We stand thanked already.
This audience here. I'll begin right away by saying that I'm going to focus on 3 artists, and I see many others here in the audience. Manish Pushkale, Amit Hussain, Arpita, many others who would be, I have Gopi Gajbani, many others who also explore abstraction in their own terms. Abstraction is a term which I feel has several meanings, and I would say at the start that it's regarded differently in Europe and the United States, very differently, and differently in the Eastern world. And again, perhaps, it's viewed differently in the Islamic world of conceptual thought and practice. In the Islamic world, abstraction is highly venerated, as the visual image is prohibited by religious law. Indeed, the abstract visual image is considered to be sacred practice in Islam, be it calligraphy or architecture or painting. I'd like you to consider the foundations of architecture that are based on the circle and square grid, defined with finesse and sophistication in the dome, the arches, the quadrangles, the intricate pattern of jalis, enhanced by the play of light. Maybe the most sophisticated expression of this that I have seen is at the Alhambra in Spain, which reaches a point, a pinnacle, which I have not seen elsewhere. But of course, closer to home, we have the Char Bagh Gardens right here at Humayun's tomb, and of course the Taj in Agra, built as a walled enclosure and quartered into 4 with water channels in the 4 directions. You find this virtually in every Mughal garden. In the art of the book, the circle, embossed and otherwise, is worshipped as Noor, which has its own mystical connotations. And of course, there are many other references that I could put you to. But you'll ask me, why do you begin with the Islamic concept? Well, because three of the artists that I'm going to speak about, two of them inhered to an Islamic sensibility, though they may not speak about it. I'm going to be speaking about Saida Haidar Raza, who's here with us, and I'm going to speak about Zarina Hashmi, both of whom I've written about, and it's in this book, which was released last year. Your history gets in the way of my memory, and I would like to thank the Asian Cultural Foundation in New York for being able to have opportunities to interview Zarina. And in fact, Mr. VAJPEYI, who was responsible for my having a very mini scholarship or fellowship from the Ministry of Culture for writing my book on Raza, which was released in '97 on his 75th birthday. The third artist is Sohail Kadri, who's no longer with us, and who sadly, whose images I had them copied and I had them, but they didn't come out. So we are going to just speak about him and remember him as a truly great artist in exploring abstraction. Here again, I was sent to Copenhagen and I interviewed him. To come to Western concepts, abstraction was a new innovation, something new and experimental in the 20th century. If this were not the case, then people like Wassily Kandinsky and Joseph Albers, Paul Klee, Hans Hofmann would not have written their treatises and their defense of abstraction, because abstraction was highly controversial. It was contentious, controversial right through the first half of the century until the raw expressionism in the US, and that established it with Jackson Pollock and Hoffman and others. If I come to Kandinsky and his book, it was written in 1914, The Spiritual and Art, and he called abstraction spiritual. That was the way he defended it. And he laments, this was in 1914, he laments the nightmare of materialism, which he says was symptomatic of the times in 1914. And he goes on to talk about it. But he talks about it in a way that, we would not be able to perhaps relate to, but I would relate to them. The art forms of today, 1914, and those of the past will be at once recognized as opposed to each other, to one another. The first is purely external, it has no future. The second, being internal, contains the seed of the future. Then he goes on in another paragraph to say, the Stimmung of a picture can deepen and purify the spectator. I'm going to jump from that. I think all of us know of Paul Klee and his book, The Thinking Eye. I won't quote from it. I would just like to touch on Jackson Pollock as the phenomenon, the man on the block. I mean, in 1944, he was totally unknown. In 1946 to 47, he was a phenomenon. He was, everywhere in the newspapers. But the way they speak about him, even that has got a barb, it's got a sting to it. And you can realize that it was not something that was, abstraction was never fully accepted. You could argue that with me in the West. Jackson Pollock, quote from a paper, rules enamel paint on canvas. Secondly, another point, somewhere else, he numbers his paintings instead of naming them. Another point, he applies sand to give animated texture. Let's examine the difference of entirely Eastern thought and practice. Specifically, when we say in India, we could venture to say that abstraction was always there. It was nothing new. It was present through centuries, so much so that we took it for granted. There's abstraction in sound, the recitation of Om. There's abstraction in music, the Nirguna genre of music. The yantras as visual diagrams are centuries old, used for meditation and also for tantric practice. Son Kadri explains the difference between the Western and the Eastern approach in painting. He says, the Western approach to painting is that you come full with the heart and the head, filled with your impressions, histories, and experiences. Think of Jackson Pollock. You unload these on the canvas. It is a kind of catharsis, which at times can be aggressive. In the East, we have another approach. In the East, the motivation is silence. Because the canvas is empty, you have to approach it with an empty mind. Only two emptinesses can communicate. When emptiness and fullness are in conflict, they fight. They cannot dance together. Son Kadri says, I have to ask permission of the paper to inscribe on it my strokes, my lines, and my dots. When I begin my work, I am reminded of lines from my poem. I am a dot in the silence of the void. I would say in many ways, Raza Saab has had a very, very similar approach from the 1980s. You see, the philosophy of Kadri is an integral part of his process of painting, which I watched, because his process of painting is one of becoming. He would leave the work on paper and say, now we can go home from the studio. And I'd say, but it's not finished. He said, no, it'll take all night. It'll keep happening. And that's how he worked. It's wonderful, wonderful to have the privilege of watching an artist's work. Kadri's philosophy derived from the Buddhist doctrine of shunyata. He was a practicing Buddhist tantric yogi. The yogi was, of course, added by Souza. And he believed in the emptiness of the void. Now look, there's a very interesting paradox here, because at the same time, the same visual diagram is used for the void, and it is used for the beach, the seed, for the life and living and of birth. So that is why Shunya takes the same visual manifestation. And this, of course, is manifest again in the works of Raza Saab. So I ask you to contemplate the paintings of Son Kadri because I can't show them to you. And his paintings are built for contemplation, as also the works by Raza Saab. Often the title he used was Purusha Prakriti, the union of the male and the female, or of germination and others. I would like to just mention now, as we go, I have maybe 5 or 7 minutes left. Can we start the slides, please? We start with Raza Saab's studio in Gobyo, which I visited and walked with him through the village, and you see how beautiful it is on the outskirts of the village and next to a forest. This is his studio. Some of us have had the privilege of visiting it in Gobyo in the south of France. Next, please. And this is the interior as it used to be. I'm sure Raza Saab would remember it. All his mementos that are on the table and the forest outside. The pictures are by me, so they're not absolutely perfect. And you have the Bindu, a small painting also. And also the Shaligram next to it. These are all things that Raza Saab would bring back from India in his visit with Janine. And he started visiting India. 1950 is when he landed in Paris. And from 59 he was making visits back to India. Mainly Madhya Pradesh, then Rajasthan. And all these, the colors of Rajasthan. He called them Rajasthan. There were 3 paintings, I think, called Rajasthan, and many more perhaps. Saurashtra. Originally they had geographic names, locations. Then they went on to a more abstract form. I would like to put to you something, that I'm speaking about 3 artists. Why did I choose them? Not because they were Muslim, but because the word abstraction by itself is to abstract from memory effort. And let me talk to you, therefore, about three artists who lived outside India. And therefore, their idea, their conceptual memory of what was India was abstracted. And therefore, I bring to you Raza, Zarina Hashmi, and Son Khatri. We moved on. So this is Zarina's work, one of her paper cast things, and one of the most powerful ones that she did. Next, please. Yeah, this of course is one of the most famous ones. Was, I would say, one of my favorite ones of Raza, where he was very touched by a line from GEETI, which is in fact a reinterpretation from the Gita, and it is, he inscribed the lines. I believe Ramu Gandhi had something to do with it. Ramu, you will remember again, was a philosopher and told me that he had talked to Raza about this, and Raza used these. I stand to be corrected. In the midst of darkness, there is light. Light persists. In the midst of... Can I read this?
Speak to the mic, please. Mic.
In the midst of darkness, light persists. In the midst of... I can't read it. And truth persists. So I don't have to read it to you. And of course, this really is going to relate to what ATUL DODIYA will speak about, but it is from Gandhi. Next, please. We move very quickly, but maybe they're not in order. This is the very large painting, which takes a line from Ashok Vajpeyi's poem, Ma Jab Lord Kar You know, it's Ashok and I had a very interesting conversation. He said, I was writing my civil service exam and I had nothing to, there's no philosophy behind this, but it was reinterpreted by Raza by something as a gift to his country in 1980 when he was asked to exhibit in the Triennale. It was completely taken out of context. And there's something for you. Abstraction also takes things out of context and makes it something, turns it on its head, and it becomes something great. And I mean, it was always great. The poem was very moving, but the fact is it becomes philosophy. And here in this painting of 1980, you do have still the gestural paintings of Raza, which were earlier, and you see them on the side, the vibrant colors which have abstracted from Rajput painting, and you have the beginning of the beach or the bindu, which is solid and not yet working and moving, but solid and dense. And of course the margin of the page, which is again like many miniature paintings. These are not in order. Can we go back, please? In the back. This, of course, is from the painting, which is called sometimes Genesis. Next, please. Back, please. We missed one now. That's the one that I wanted to bring, which is Nag, and it's sometimes called Bindu, another version of it, where he brings in the whole abstraction of colors, the 5 elements of water, earth, water, fire, sky, and akash in the 5 colors that he uses. And I think we know that. Next, please. And this is to come to Zarina Hashmi. Zarina actually is somebody who went through, she left India, she got married in 1957 to Shah Hashmi and moved with him through many destinations. Tokyo, Bonn, Paris, Santa Cruz, these are some of the ones I remember. And finally she landed in New York in 1975. And I met her 31 years later. She was still living in the same apartment. And it was a rented apartment. Zarina, who really loved homes, never owned a house till now. She doesn't own a house, she lives in a rented apartment. Now, I think nobody can say more than I can how much she loves homes, because her early work from 1990 she did to 94, to 2004, over 14 years, she made 14 portfolios. 14. And they begin with the house at Aligarh, and they begin with fables. As she said, she visited her sister Rani, and this is another aspect to it, that in 57 she got married, in 59 her father decided to move back to his roots in Punjab, now in Pakistan, so the family moved across the border. Then she didn't have a home. Where was home? From Paris she wanted to come back, but there was no home to come back to. So this was the beginning of her dilemma, and that house, father's house, is actually on her computer, on her laptop, as the the opening thing that you see when you open the laptop. This is the one called Shelters, next please, and this is Marrakesh or Morocco, and these are paper cast sculptures. The most powerful of these is the one called Flight Log, which actually took me to the time when I first met Zarina, because she used to use glider planes. She learned to fly, and this was the contradictory aspect of Zarina, that she had a tremendous wanderlust. And she said in Flight Log on 4 pages, she used it like an Islamic book, but in paper cast. And 4 pages, yes, I'm supposed to stop. So we will run through the slides, and I'm glad we don't have Sohan Kadri to run through also. She said, I used to fly, but couldn't find the place to land. Next please, that's the one called Flight Log, which when I visited her in Santa Cruz, she just made it in 96. There are some others of Zarina's, but maybe time does not permit me to speak about this, except to say that her most poignant works are called Home is a Foreign Place, a series of 36 woodcuts. And the 36 woodcuts move from the house at Aligarh, and the courtyard, and the threshold, and the door, and the sun and the moon that she will see trapped in that house, out to the road beyond, to the world beyond. Perhaps another series that she did, which was very important, was Atlas of My World, where perhaps, again, the most important one was the one of the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent. The borders are very thickly demarcated, but that border, which she had to cross many times, the Wagah border, is demarcated like a chain. And it is something that takes her, in these woodcuts, ultimately to the road. The road is a cross, 4 directions. And then it takes her finally to the end, which is the border. I would end there. I would like to just quote from the Quran, in fact. It's Surah 61. We should show them our signs upon the horizons and within their souls, until it becomes manifest to them that it is the truth. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now we have dancer, choreographer, ASTAD Dev.
The contemporary dance genre was that the Indian classical tradition did not permit me to move out of the established storytelling route so that I could explore movement. For me, movements linked together created phrases which could then be juxtaposed like a piece of puzzle, which only when completed gives you the whole picture. Sometimes people get impatient. I'm going to be sort of giving a few examples of the very many works, but these are few which I felt would be apt for this particular talk. In the early 80s, I put together a piece called Basics. It comprised me moving on a stage, which the only props were a cube, a triangle, and a rectangle. The idea was to use myself as a catalyst to keep the objects seemingly moving in mid-air. It was made visually aesthetic with lighting that complemented the thought. What the audience saw was a geometrical shape that was being moved by me using my body as a driver. Another example, when I did Chrysalis, the idea was to explore the life within. I operated out of a huge black box, 15 feet by 12 feet by 3 feet, into which various size windows were cut. What the piece depicted was the stirring of life within the chrysalis before the moment of birth. So you saw a foot, a hand up to the wrist, eyes, a turning neck, hips, and finally there was the emergence of the whole individual. So when you saw this piece actually being performed, unfortunately a lot of my works are not sort of recorded still, and this was done way back in 1986, which was commissioned by the Goethe Institute for the 500th anniversary of Bach. So I sort of wanted, as I said, this piece. So when the piece really began, you just saw the wrist and only this part, and then sort of came back in. And the box was very intricately sort of made, and this was operated by two people inside who had to slide the windows open. The next thing you saw was just the toes coming down and then sort of disappearing. And then all of a sudden at one side, you just saw the arms coming and nothing else. The next portion you saw again, the leg like a pendulum swinging. The other window just showed the waist. Another long window just brought the eyes and slowly the neck, and a complete 360-degree turning. Then you saw the entire body but not the head. And then eventually in the end, the emergence of the whole individual. When a painter paints, he uses colors and lines to make a picture. He sometimes titles it and you look at it. Similarly, when I performed abstraction, what I was inviting the audience to enjoy was the visual feast of light, color, movement, and stage design to interpret my work as he wished. That's the whole point of abstraction, isn't it? To enable the visualization of work of art in any form as an expression of one's own individuality. Another work of mine in 1978 called Chewing Gum saw me in a box 2 feet high, wrapped in stretch fabric that responded to sharp hands or leg movements that resembled the shape chewing gum being pulled into the mouth of a child. A completely light-hearted piece at the start of my own journey into the unmapped, incomprehensible, bewildering world of contemporary dance in India. I had nothing to compare myself with. Everything was happening in the West. So abstraction became a refuge as well as a very exciting territory waiting for someone to come along and push the envelope. For me, pushing the envelope has meant using space in my dance narratives as among the most important facet of our work. This has meant moving out to the proscenium stage into spaces that inspire. And one of the spaces which I will talk about India, I've done a lot of spaces at the Alhambra, the Great Wall of China, buildings, the Gaudi building in Barcelona, but in Champaner, where there was a promotional event, I chose to perform my work, Devi, on the top of a crumbling 40 feet high wall, which is a part of the fort. Again, using drama of light, costume and mask, I managed to create very strong visuals that used the space I inhabited at that moment to communicate the message of Devi. Everyone got it. Even the large number of village people were gathered to watch. When I moved to the very edge of the wall with a steep group below, there was a response from the audience that showed how completely engaged they were. It was very gratifying. Yet we must remember that the exploration of abstraction can be a tightrope walk, a double-edged sword. Too often it's used as an excuse for work that is shoddy because it seems to lack meaning. Too often our viewers and audience and consumers, if one may use that expression, subjected to so-called abstractionism that is so diffuse, so obscure, so obfuscated, that it descends to the absurd in the manner of the emperor's new clothes. This is what we must guard against. We'll end it with a little piece. Thank you.
As you can read, abstraction can be quite senseless. UDAYAN VAJPEYI.
ASTAD, I hope I was also a dancer like you. We have danced instead of saying something. Normally the abstraction is not talked about in relation to literature. I mean, you talk about painting, you talk about other forms, but dance, for example. The abstraction in poetry is hardly talked about. I mean, it is normally presumed to be something with meaning. And in Sanskrit tradition, there are three usage of the word. You can use the word in three different ways. And one is when one is called a literature or a text which is centered on the word, Shabdashrit, in which the word is the center and the meaning is irrelevant. So the Vedic chanting or the mantras and all that, they are word centered. The other form, other use of the word is where it is meaning centered. And so all the itihas and all the Puran and all the history writing, sociology and whatever is meaning centered. So it's basically the word itself is not important. I mean, what word you use for writing history is not so important, because it is centered on the meaning. And the word, and in literature, and it is a very beautiful word for literature in Hindi and Sanskrit, it's called Sahitya. And Sahitya means Sahitata, it means togetherness. And there is a togetherness of word and meaning. So, what does it mean? It means that the word and the meaning coexist. Neither is the word ever gets exhausted into meaning, or nor does it renders the meaning irrelevant. So what is happening is that in literature, in poetry, in novel, some good ones, and short stories, the word and the meaning, they coexist, and that's why we come back to literature again and again. We want to see it again and again. Now, how does that happen? How does, in literature, the word and the meaning both remain equally important? Why is it that the word and the meaning coexist, and coexist for good? The reason is that, the area of mediation between the word and the meaning, there's a very beautiful article in this issue of which Suresh has written, and because he's a close friend, I've read that article, and he very beautifully says that the word and the meaning, the mediation, the area of mediation is quite abstract, is an uncertain zone. So when you are actually moving from word to the meaning, you are passing through an uncertain area. And this uncertain area is a, if I may say so, it's a very abstract area. It's a very uncertain zone of uncertainty. It's like that zone where the stalker in Tarkovsky's film, that person goes. Everything is uncertain. And that's why it's possible for people to have various interpretations of one work of art. That to some the meaning is something else, to somebody else the meaning is something else. So what I now want to suggest is that in literature, this area, which I'm trying to say is an area of uncertainty or area of abstraction, is highlighted. It is made alive. It is made charged. So what happens is, because this area is charged, so the word never gets exhausted into a meaning. And therefore, the word and the meaning both remain alive throughout. And that's why every time you want to read a poem or you want to read a short story again and again, because at no time the word will get exhausted or finished into meaning, like in Itihas Granth. This is number one thing that, and therefore I would say that all literature, with the exception of nothing, is actually abstraction. Because if it's not underlining that abstraction, that abstract area, then either it will become word-centric or it will become meaning-centric. Because this is not done, because the area is so alive, this area is so charged, that the word and the meaning, they remain themselves. And of course they go on, the meaning goes on changing, etc. The second thing is that I want to say about abstraction literature is that I think it can be applied to many other arts also. There is a grammar and the technology in every art. If you're a writer, you know how to make a sentence, or how to break a sentence, or how to undo a sentence and all that. It's a kind of some kind of technology, grammar, that you know, which is quite tangible. If you are a really good critic or a good theorist, you will be able to decode that technology. And the same happens in painting also, in cinema also. And most of the time when we talk about abstraction, we are actually talking about the technology and the grammar, which one is not able to frame into an available format. That's why we see that this is abstract, because the grammar is. But anyway, the grammar or technology of any art form is always tangible. I mean, you really need to be insightful, and you go into that, and you will be able to say a lot about the grammar or technology of that, which is concrete, which is tangible. But, like for example, you can write a poem in Doha, you write a poem in Chopai, you can write a free verse, or you can identify a cubist painting or impressionistic painting, and because this is all various ways of painting and various ways of creating. Doha, Chopai, there's various kinds of technologies in grammars. Of course, it's a very crude word relating to, if one tries to relate it to work of art, but in any case, it's a grammar. But intangible. What is intangible in a work of art? To my mind, that's the swabhav of an artist. The disposition of an artist, if he is really an artist, then that remains intangible. That remains an abstract thing. That remains in that very concrete form, whether it's abstracted image, whether it's an image with a less known forms or known forms, or it's a poem with known imagery or unknown imagery, or whatever syntax, whatever meter, whatever. In that form, everything else is tangible except that form, that disposition of an artist. And I sometimes feel that it is this disposition of the artist which is experienced as Raza in a work of art, and that remains intangible. That can never be properly written down. It can never be stated, and in fact, it is also called a prameya, unmeasurable. So that abstract thing, I mean to say, is there in each and every work of art. So, meaning thereby, I'm trying to say that there cannot be a work of art, whether it's a literary work or any other work of art, which is not, in a sense, experienced as an abstraction. Why? Because the intangible, the swabhav of an artist, is always experienced as something intangible, as something very deeply moving, and yet it's not something which is very concrete. And therefore, you read all the Dostoevsky novels, and you know that all the Dostoevsky novels are quite differently written. Like Crime and Punishment is quite different from Idiot, it's quite different from Brothers Karamazov, etc. But there is something in all these novels which is very intangible, which is very difficult to define, which is very difficult to catch hold of, and yet it is experienced. I would think that this intangible is the swabhav or the disposition of an artist that remains abstract. Thank you.
One poem. This poem doesn't have directly to do with abstraction, but I think still it has something to do with abstraction. It's a Gujarati poem, and I read in Gujarati only.
By whom?
It's written in 1974 by Sitanshu Yashash Chandra, and it's called a Gujarati poem for Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh માટે એક ગુજરાતી કવિતા. It starts like tank ની આગે કૂચ. Tank is moving forward. ટેન્ત કહું કચ ડાળે તોરે, રેંક ટકું તચ હાડે તોતે, હેંક તળુ કક કેડા તોચે, હેંક તેંક કચ ડાંક તોંક હા. Winner tank. કળે ડતો ચટકળ હું. ટેંકત 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 ટેંકત, ડતો કળે ચટકળ હું. ટેંકત ટેંકત, હેંક તોંગ લટકાચ ટાક હા. It says માણસની વેદના અને તેના મરણિયા હુમલાનો આનંદ. Man's sorrow and his joy of his killing attack. ટેન્થ કળે હું ટચડા તો હું, ટેટે રેડે હે હે ચૂમ, ચેચે 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 ચેચે, ટેંકત ટેંકત હોંક ટાંક કચડા હા તો એ. ટેંકની પીછે, tank going backward. कहूँ कच्छ, हकू हच, हकू हच, कहूँ कच्छ, कहूँ कच्छ, हकू हच, कहूँ कच्छ. This is a poem by Sitaram Shrestha. I thought it's better that I write and read, so it's, time-wise it should be okay. Let me start with an incident that happened some years ago. Well-known modern Gujarati writer Suresh Joshi told me this. Ashokji, I'm sure you must be knowing Suresh, right? Somewhere in Baroda, some people found in the gutter an oval egg-like black stone. People were immediately convinced that this was a Shivling. Soon, a small temple was built on that corner. For those people, the biggest problem was what to name it. Finally, they decided to call it Gatareshwar Mahadev. When I heard this, I was totally open-mouthed and shocked. But now, after many years, I find this absolutely brilliant, and I love the name, Gatareshwar Mahadev. We human beings always want to name things. We want names. We have to call a thing something or the other. When we love something, we often give many names. Like a child in the house, there's one specific name and there are quite a few nicknames. I believe there are hundreds or more than 100 names for camel in Arab countries. You must have noticed that often, I'm coming to painting, you must have noticed that often abstract painters don't title their work. Often they are untitled. Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled 3, or composition sometimes. Composition with red, or composition with blue. Or sometimes a title like Situation at the most. Situation 1, Situation 2, or Situation 3. Unlike abstract painter, figurative painters usually title their work. Between the spider and the lamb. Man with a bouquet of plastic flowers, and so on. I studied painting in Bombay at the Sir J.J. School of Art, and we were taught that there are two ways in painting. One is the figurative way, and the other is the abstract way. They had literally made a division, as if we were rivals. Figurative painters would not connect with abstractionists, and abstractionists would look down on the figurative painters. Abstraction was supposed to be very high, pure, spiritual, and the ultimate goal. Compared to that, figurative painting was lower pursuit, about the local and the mundane. Unfortunately, there are people who still believe in this. Today, I am not in a minimal mood. Painting is my area, and I love to talk about painting. I like talkative paintings as well. Paintings do speak. Paintings do talk. Figurative or abstract, all types of paintings talk. The problem occurs when you try to find a meaning into it. I don't think a work of art means anything in particular. It reveals many things in diverse ways. Meaning is the enemy of abstraction or all painting in general. Is Ram Kumar a landscape artist or an abstract artist? How to define him? 50% landscape and 50% abstract? Or 70% landscape and 30% abstract? But why do we need to define him in this manner? His painting slowly transforms landscape into abstraction and abstraction into landscape. It's a moving experience. Ram Kumar controls his space like a magician. I have often written long text on my paintings. Mostly these texts are poems. The poem is an abstraction with words which someone has created and which I incorporate into my painting as a ready-made. The ready-made from another discipline becomes part of my visual process. The overlap of words, forms, language, script, meaning, sign, etc. created a new hybrid. What happens to the viewer here? Sometimes a text is written in Gujarati or in English. What happens if the viewer doesn't know the language? The works of art generates many such dilemmas. It's a beautiful feeling even when I don't follow a word of Chinese while looking at, say, 7th or 8th century Chinese text-based works. Our own miniatures and medieval European manuscripts are full of text. I have never felt that had I known these texts, their meanings, then my experience or my joy would have doubled. I don't think we need to understand the meaning of things. Let's take an example of the Dutch master Rembrandt. In a Rembrandt painting, within a second, you recognize that it is a portrait, old man or a young man, very skillfully rendered in oil. This much you notice in a few moments. But after that, what happens that you still remains within the painting, with the painting. The painting takes hold of you. It is not just a skill, the treatment of pain, the understanding of light, the structure and the anatomy of the sitter or the model. It is the totality that grabs you. This new space away from meaning or reality or logic, that is the abstract truth of Rembrandt. I would like to show you some of my works where I consciously abandon my strong figuration and try to play with the abstract. Sometimes I go very close to the forms and their nature. Sometimes I move away with a sense of fun. It is my biggest regret that I am not able to work in pure abstraction. I know I am contradicting myself, but at the same time, I have a wish that someday I want to work with just pure form and color. You may not believe it, but my favorite painters are Casimir Malevich and Piet Mondrian. Since I find it difficult to work in that mode, I simply borrow or grab what they have done. Of course, I do inject few things inside and change it, give another sort of a meaning to it. But I also feel that within abstraction, there is abstract painting, there are figurative paintings. Like for example, De Kooning is more figurative than Rothko. Or Rothko is more figurative than probably Reinhardt. And Reinhardt is probably more figurative than Barnett Newman. And same way, like figurative painters like Giorgio Morandi, he is figurative, but there's so much abstraction. You see bottle, pan, still life, but within a second, you are in another world. Same with Edward Hopper. I have got some 70 slides, but it will be a quick thing because there are lots of details. That's why it's a large thing. But I'm just showing you the images where of course, a large oeuvre, but selected a specific kind of body. I won't go in detail of each one, but maybe one specific body I may let you know. Can you have slides also? You like to थोड़ा
ये बीच वाली भी बंद कर दीजिए.
These are all large works, 6 feet by 4 feet.
These slides.
इस तरफ की भी.
It was a triptych. You will see 3 paintings. It's called Dambula Rock Landing. My home in Angkor. My school in Angkor. O Angkor, a poem. I did a series of 14 works where I used contemporary Gujarati poetry, and it was done after 2002. And there were large 7 feet by 4 feet works with charcoal crushed in water, and text was written with marble dust and watercolor. And if you see the works, because the way layers of charcoal was applied, you feel that as if the poem is emerging out of ash. What happened in Gujarat in 2002, after that I did a series of works which was in the form of cabinets called Broken Branches, where lots of killings and violence, what happened in Gujarat, in Gandhi's Gujarat, which was very strongly being sort of depicted. And after that I felt enough of this, and I myself was not happy with what was happening and what I was doing. I said I want to work with purity, with probably abstraction. And I started doing these poems, and they are contemporary Gujarati poets, and the poetry has nothing to do with social political issues. They were just pure work of art. But the medium I chose, like charcoal, crushed charcoal and all that, and somehow it happened as if the poetry is emerging out of ash. And it looked again, you went back to 2002 Gujarat. Some of these works are on display at the National Gallery of Modern Art till the 29th of December. The pillars were done with marble dust, and I just wanted to have the poetry on the high pedestal. That's how I kind of did it. But when I was doing this work, and at same evening I heard Manoj Khanderia, the poet who writes ghazals mainly, he died of cancer on that same evening when I was actually projecting the text and writing. And this bird from Mughal miniature, I just turned it upside down. My Italian girlfriend. There are 3 works.
There are 3 girlfriends, are there?
Yeah. Up till now.
Real ones or abstract?
Of course, real. A series of paintings, large-scale works called Cracks in Mondrian. And this series happened when on the 26th January 2001, I was in London at the Tate Modern. We were exhibiting there, and I was looking at a beautiful Mondrian which is there in their collection. And because the Mondrian painted white on white in many layers, there are thin cracks. If you see with a close distance, you can see the Mondrian painting full of cracks, which I just love it. So the same day, on the 26th January, there was a huge earthquake in Bhuj, in Kutch, in Gujarat. And I just connected those cracks and Mondrian's crack together. And at the same time, I just enlarged in a large scale the same Mondrian painting, but the pink patch which you see here, this one, it is supposed to be the map of Awadh. And these maps, which in the form of a pink wound, which comes on Mondrian, these maps I took from a French cartographer who came in Siraj-ud-Daula's time. And he did that. So the maps which we have now today of Awadh or Gujarat or Kashmir, whatever, it was so different some 300 years back. And I don't know what kind of these maps will be after 300 years. And still there's so much fight about the line of control, borders, the state, etc. And I feel that Mondrian, the earth is just beautiful like Mondrian, and these cracks which we have created. And I thought, let me just do this, and I attached the drainage pipe. We know what runs through these drainage pipes, and of course I was going into the Mondrian period. I wanted to bring him into my time, and I thought this is a interesting device to have Mondrian attached to the drainage pipes. This is Shah Jahanabad, that means Delhi, and this is the map of Delhi. Again here, this one, and of course the way it is written, because he was a French guy. Bengal, Gujarat, Hyderabad, Kashmir. This is the map of Kashmir, 300 years back. Malwa. Few watercolors. Richard Serra is a well-known American abstract sculptor. Huge, heavy, tons of iron he uses in his work, and I did with very little pigment and water, just the shape of one of the Serra work. It's called Serra. Deceit, Fontana, no. I did a series of paintings which are shown here in Delhi. Malevich Matters and Other Shutters. Kazimir Malevich, Russian supremacist artist. I also did a series of 3 paintings called Grey Market. And I was looking at the graph of the stock market, and those I saw as like a kind of minimal abstract work. And I painted this. Tarun Mehta's diagonal is there. Tarun Mehta does very well in auctions. Farewell. The poem by Lorca. If I am dying, leave the balcony open. The child is eating an orange. From my balcony I see him. The reaper is reaping the barley. From my balcony I hear him. If I am dying, leave the balcony open. Some details of the same painting. Elegy to Spanish Republic, a work by abstract artist Robert Motherwell, and Goldfish by Matisse. A series of paintings called Bako Exist and Imagine. It's text-based works like blackboard paintings. They're written originally in Gujarati by a contemporary modern, one of our most important poet called Lap Shankar Thakur, where a young boy aged 10, 12 meets Mahatma Gandhi in his sleep, and they both have a dialogue. And that dialogue has nothing to do with independence movement or other freedom struggle, but quite fantastic, unusual sort of dialogue. "14 stations I did. I live in a suburb called Ghatkopar in Mumbai, and from Mumbai to VT, Victoria Terminus, if you go, there are 13 stations. I added one more station, and of course you can see the Bollywood villain, but you can also see Malevich rectangles. There was an exhibition called Cinema City, and for that I had painted this particular series. See, sometimes I feel that, if I don't do this, if I don't write this, and then what remains? Why not just that? But I can't do, I need to have Gulshan Grover. Again, Motherwell. Grace. It's a roller shutter box which is operable. You can throw it up, pull it down. Flagellation. Thank you.
We had 4 very different, very rich presentations. Thank you all the panelists. Now is the time for anyone who would like to ask a question or offer a very brief comment, no more than 1.5 minutes, and address it to the panelist you want the answer or the comment from. Go ahead. The first one is always difficult. Let someone take the courage in her mouth or his mouth.
Hey, just a minute. Khanna, please do utter your name.
It's very expensive. Since my name has already been announced, I don't think I need to be announced. Atul, my question is to you. What, if any, is the significance of putting the energy to the Spanish Republic in that work, which you had just now? What drove you to introducing that big, it's a huge painting?
I tell you. The station painting.
Yeah, it's a black and white painting.
Yes, absolutely. When I was asked to do work for Cinema City project, I thought there's two things. There's a villains from Bollywood and the station signs. It's obvious. Cinema is there, the city is there. You don't have to look for your subject there. And when I added, I use the medium called crackle paste. It's an American company which provides you, and when you apply thick paste, it gets cracked and it remains. It's like the natural sort of feel it has. So the whole surface of the station sign is cracked, and you have villains, bad guys, and then again adding Robert Motherwell's Elegy to Spanish Republic. Now, of course, first of all, to begin, I just love those paintings of Elegy. Yeah, and at the same time, the title, it's an elegy to the Spanish Republic, the whole nation. So that's something, I was thinking that how to create an elegy for my city, and or a kind of a poem which is or there is a kind of sad aspect which I see, cracked surface. You know, though I mean, you know, we see villains and some people laugh actually, you know, when they saw Pran or Rahman or whoever. But I thought that this sudden abstraction of having Robert Motherwell there, which is basically an extremely sorrowful work for keeping the Spanish Civil War in mind, I think that that would add something more to my painting. And now here also there's an interesting thing, that how many people know Robert Motherwell?
Well, that's the point, you see, you know, where I was taught is
Yeah.
The Motherwell painting has its own history.
Yes.
As to why he chose those particular forms. They do not apply to this country.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of bullfighting or whatever.
Yeah.
How come what is the necessary relationship you will make with that, with Motherwell's elegy, to what you are doing, to the city, you know, to the film city? How do you marry the two?
Well, actually, and how I see that, you know, it's a process where you attempt to find out things, you know, sometimes. Not necessarily that, you know, you plan the scheme and then kind of execute. So I thought that, you know, in this kind of a black form, in this yellow station sign thing, and then, you know, there is in a similar black, the text has been written. And, well, Motherwell must have done in certain context, but and that too in 50s or, you know, late 40s. And here today, this work still speak to me. You know, I once told Tayyab, you know, when he said, you know, you were talking about Duchamp and all this thing, you know, that period was different, that, you know, time and those concerns were different. But I said, what shall I do? This guy bothers me in Ghatkopar every day. You know, so I mean, you know, like I see this work, and I need not have to have the exact, you know, like if I think in terms of his concern and the context in which he painted, then probably this may not be useful to me. So how I shall make, you know, thing mine?
No, but I mean, what is the necessity for bringing that in? I mean, that has a separate history, its own volition and everything else.
Yeah.
And it was done at a particular time. Now, that being so,
Yeah.
it obviously obsesses a lot of painters.
Right.
Not only you, but I mean, it's a remarkable painting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but to bring in that association into Ghatkopar,
Yeah.
you know, putting it there with the exact knowledge that very few people are going to know what the hell it's all about.
That's true.
Isn't that so?
You know what happens, I don't know what to do, because I know, say I did, you know, painting of Raja Ravi Verma's Gangavataran, and on the Gangavataran where the Ganga is located, I painted nude descending staircase, you know, of Duchamp. And I was thinking at that time when I did in 98 that, you know, the conceptual art, the installation, the mixed media was coming like a huge force, you know, from the West. That's what I feel, you know, in India as well. And someone has to hold it, like Shiva, you know. So I did my own shadow with my head spread like this. Now when my mother saw that painting, she is absolutely familiar with myth of Ganga, but she doesn't know the Duchamp and nude descending staircase. What happened when I exhibit that work abroad, people immediately recognize the Duchamp, but they don't know the myth of Ganga. And now I know both the things. So I said, I said I will do it. And I just love this puzzle. People are baffled. My poet friends, their responses are hilarious. They said the Ganga is polluted, so you have done this kind of a black grey cubist thing. They don't know again, you know, Duchamp. So I think, you know, this is just engaging people, viewer, you know.
No, but are you sort of playing ducks and drakes? I mean, are you playing, you're having great fun with this kind of duality, this kind of, some people recognizing it, others don't.
Yeah.
Particularly when you've been commissioned to do this city project, which is a
Yeah.
vast project.
Yeah.
Can you sort of play sort of fast and loose with this project?
Well, I don't know. I just kind of, you know, I feel that whatever I like when I see, you know, other people's
Whatever
art.
you like, you're coming to another point now.
Mhm.
Because you're coming down to what happens in your studio is your business, in a sense.
Yeah.
You're connected to society in a more complex kind of a way. When you undertake a large public viewing, publicly made, then I think it's almost incumbent on you to think about it. That you can't just say, because I'm so and so and I can do this and I like you show and so on, I put it there. It's not your job, it's not your interest.
No, but I
Whether
think
people
artists always,
understand you show or not, you know.
no, I think artists always works like that.
No, I don't think so.
I think because otherwise what happens, it becomes a bit, like
I'm not saying, you don't become a slave to something, you don't make it so damned obvious either. And therein lies the actual problem. I mean, that you're caught between that. But to import something which is so completely foreign, you see, and unless people like the foreign stuff, that's another matter.
No, but my dear Kishan, the thing is that, nothing is foreign to me. Everything is mine.
Nothing is foreign to me either.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It is not foreign to me.
Like if I say,
but I do recognize that, there are civilizational differences between the West and the East. And when you are living in either situation, there's a certain ethos which you have got to function within. And you can't sort of suddenly throw khichdi into a sausage and mash,
if I say moon is mine, if I say the moon is mine, no one can snatch it from me. It's mine.
Well, let's finish this
Yeah.
dialogue on that note. Anybody else? Nothing is foreign to me. Moon is mine. What about you? Well, if there are no questions, yeah, please. No, just a minute. You have to.
No, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
No,
so
whatever. You can't speak like that. You have to speak.
Just like Atul's painting, he always uses the references. So if I am familiar with his kind of languages, I don't feel any. Even though if I don't have a huge knowledge of many things, maybe I know as a popular landscape like Mondrian. Okay, so when he's showing a Mondrian, I immediately can relate.
Yeah.
So that means it's my knowledge. So if I don't recognize any particular painting, I don't necessarily need to know. I mean, then as I think one of you said, we simply enjoy. We simply feel the form and color. So for his painting comes to me something like that, not necessarily always related to history. Like when we are in his time, when he studied in art colleges, the way he was taught, maybe in today's context, his daughter is in art college, maybe she is learning some different way, so education system, everything, and that for internet we are now so much aware of many things. So what he said, nothing is foreign to me, is becoming more appropriate. So to understand his language, for me, I don't know, maybe Kishanji is trying to say indifferent, but for me, I'm even younger than him. So it is not a.
In other words, there are many ways of looking at Atul DODIYA. Two have come up.
I think what Mr. Khanna is trying to say, and according to my understanding, is that freedom for an artist comes with a certain responsibility, and he has to function within any thought. Is that what you're trying to say?
But do we really have to?
But if there is artistic freedom in a person who wants to do something.
One can argue that freedom with responsibility and freedom with irresponsibility. I am free and I'm not responsible. Go to hell. That could be a viewpoint. So while freedom is invariably or inevitably connected with responsibility, there could be a stance where freedom is freedom and I am responsible to pick up whatever my freedom leads me to.
See, I tell you, I think this is very strictly speaking what you're talking. This connotation of freedom is a very European concept of freedom. And it's landed this world in a pretty tough
Huge
kind of
difficulty.
situation as well.
Yeah.
Because you're accepting freedom for yourself, but what about the freedom of everybody else? And because freedom is only that which you accept for yourself on the understanding that the same holds good for everybody else. I mean, that is the democratic principle.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that, then what do you do? I mean, in this case, I mean, anybody is free to make a conglomerate work or situation as they please. Nobody's going to put anybody in prison or whatever. But for the thing to take import and sense and weight and continuously so that it is going that meaning is going to go on increasing. Like certain poems, for instance. You take the wasteland, take Eliot's wasteland. There are innumerable references to Dante, several painters, several artists. They're all there, but they all add up to a very concentrated meaning at the end. And I feel the work. Exactly. I think that the work of art. I'm coming to that. I think the work of art has to have this concentration. Even if it appears to be diluted and multifarious and all that kind of thing, I think first of all it's got to engage, and engage constantly. Even when you're not looking at it, it must engage, and then the engagement takes place because all these various things impinge upon the totality of that particular experience. I think that's what it happens.
You know what I'm saying is this, like this Motherwell's elegy to Spanish Republic. Now there are many other Motherwells as well, apart from this series, which also I like very much. Then why is this specific one I chose? So that means there is a reason behind choosing this Motherwell. Whether it works as a painting, that's another question. But I didn't took any other abstract work of Motherwell.
So my question then is, what is the specific import, the reason for this particular painting, which you know and I know, and a lot of people who know the history about you? What is the particular, how does it actually add to the sum total of what you've done? This is what I'd like to know. I may be ignorant, but I would like to know that.
No, I think it probably it creates a sort of a foreign element, like the other texture or other name and blood drips, and if those works and this doesn't work, you mean that way, that as a form it doesn't work, then I think sometimes one has to take this risk, and to find out whether it will work or not. For me, they work very well. They work very well.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Just a minute.
Yes, Suresh.
No, take the mic. Say, Suresh Sharma.
Just a brief comment on freedom and folly. Use it just to concentrate on folly.
You speak loudly.
Yes. Just a brief comment on the concept of freedom and folly. Now, surely there are existential limits to freedom. I'm not talking of social limits. But for example, as a painter, if I were to ask you, is it conceivable for you to draw anything which could be said to be drawn not by a human hand? Is it possible? So there are, and in that sense, there is something foreign, because there is a threshold that you cannot cross. There are existential thresholds that you cannot cross.
Sorry. Anybody else? Yes.
I think a work of
Just a
art-
minute. Let the mic reach you. And please announce your name.
My name is Shri, and I just wanted to say that I think when an artist works, he's not consciously thinking of a form or a particular idea. They come in a kind of subliminal some way, and it's the combination of these various ideas, moods that come through. And I think where Mr. DODIYA is concerned, I think he's completely valid in his point, because no civilization has ever lived and in a kind of closed box. Whether it's the West, I mean, the entire form of abstraction that we have now brought into Indian art, a non-figural abstraction, is completely a concept of the West. But we have made it our own, and I think that's important. I love the way he used letters. I mean, I can read some Gujarati because my father taught me. But even for those who didn't read it, the forms themselves were abstract and very beautiful. I mean, it depends on your experience. What experience you bring to a painting is very different from what somebody else brings to it. I don't think one can be judgmental. At the end of the day, you may like a particular painting, but that's because you brought your entire life's experience to seeing that painting. You may not think so, but it's done in a flash and in a very subliminal way. So I don't think this is a valid argument at all.
Anyway, I don't think Krishan was being judgmental. He was only raising
No,
question.
but you know, I really have a problem. You know, yes, if it's very derivative, yes, but I don't think his painting was derivative. I think it was. It stands on its own.
Anybody else? Yes. Amba Sanyal.
No, I just was wondering, I mean, making some parallels between the metaphors of the cracks, you know, falling between the cracks, and the exploration between the intent and the object. The journeys that are started by falling between the cracks, those are the ones perhaps we are indulging in right now.
We're falling between the cracks, are we?
Well, it's an adventure.
Yeah, okay. You want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to say that lots of questions came up in my mind with the speakers who followed me, and I'd like to refer to this whole idea of meaning. The question, I think it was, meaning is the death of abstract painting, or something like that was said. You know, so, I mean, I think one of the questions that really comes up is this question of meaning, because especially if you're talking about the visual image, it's a question of meaning, and that was really the real crux of the problem with these painters in the West. They were really concerned about the fact there's no meaning, and I think there is a way out of this. I would like to propose that the fact that because there is this whole idea which also came up of the Rasa and the Rasika. Now the Rasik is the person who is the fourth stage, and that is really conceptually part of the whole aesthetics of if India, the idea of the Rasika or the Rasik, and the idea that you have a fourth stage. You have an idea in the head. First you have a table. Let's say you have a glass. You have a glass. And you have the idea of the glass in the mind of the sculptor or the artist or the painter or the collage artist. Then you come to the stage on the sculpture or the painting. The fourth stage is that of the Rasika. And that stage is added in aesthetics in India. And I think that leaves a great more freedom to the person. That's what is the strength of abstract painting, because it also relates to what you're talking about, because it's you interpret an abstract painting as you like, which you can't do if you stop with the question of meaning.
No, the point was made, I thought, that there is an area of uncertainty between word and meaning, and that is the area, if it is charred and livens, then that creates rasa, in the sense it is neither the word nor the meaning. Meaning in any case is a very debatable proposition. A poem need not mean but be. That's what a poet said. And therefore this has been a big debate whether there is a meaning or where there can be a fixed meaning at all. There are There's a poem by Wallace Stevens which says 13 ways of looking at a black bird. Now, if you have 13 ways of looking at a blackbird, surely you'll have 1300 ways of looking at works of art, and surely you'll have 13,000 ways of looking at human beings and human condition. Now, the whole question is whether it holds together, whether you are touching the threshold of meaning, or you are going so far away from that threshold to the other extreme, whether it holds together, whether it has artistic integrity, whether it's able to communicate itself in many different ways to many different people. The question is not whether you are doing this or that.
That's precisely what I'm saying, that it leaves it open. That the whole question of abstraction is therefore richer if you bring in the idea of the stage outside the painting or outside the sculpture, or outside that you play a role. You play a role in what is being shown to you and what ASTAD did with it. It's not something that there is one meaning. You're saying exactly what I said. I'm saying exactly that. That the interpretation of the painting or the work is as important as anything else. And that's probably the ultimate.
Not more important than the work itself.
No.
Ultimately, there is a primacy of the work of art.
Absolutely.
That is the most important thing to have happened. The interpretations are ways of looking.
No, but interpretations, again, if I may, there's utterly romantic attitude towards the work of art. That, you've done your bit as a writer or an artist, as a poet, and I have the freedom to say what I like and what I think what it is. And that need have no relevance to what I've said.
Yeah.
And that's the absurdity part. And I think the great work of art is extremely specific in what it sets up. It doesn't set out what it discovers in its experience. There is that specific nature within it. Because if it's just let loose and everybody says, it's just loose cannons all the time, then anybody is as good as anybody else in art and whatever. And there can be no kind of specific point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just pointing out that if you look at the history of criticism of any kind, there have been great works of art which were misunderstood, which were rejected, which were not accepted in the beginning. And over a period of time, even Wasteland itself being a victim of gross misunderstanding and gross, abject rejection, until someone came up. And there always emerges a kind of a critical consensus about the significance of a work of art. That's why you have these great artists about whom you know that these are great artists. How does that come out? That is a critical consensus which emerges out of various interpretations, some of them, intersecting each other, some of them in contestation, some of them in dialogue, etc. But all said and done, over a period of time, you have a critical consensus, more or less. And that's, I think...
Also changes over the...
Of course it changes. But those are changes. Now with that, I think we will conclude a rather long evening. Thank you very much for being here. It just occurred to me today that we might change the structure of art matters now. Because we have been wanting to have a panel discussion on themes which will apply to everything. But we find it very difficult. There are not enough people available. And so I'm now loudly thinking with you, taking the cue from him, and that we now have art matters in which we present an artist for the evening. And he or she talks about his or her journey through whatever forms they can choose to. And then there is a discussion, such discussion as instead of looking every time, and there may be an interlocutor, a discussant, or whatever the word is, with whom that person could be talking. But basically now it will be on the artist. If you think that this is a good idea, we'll go there. Very good. Of course, we
Sir,
very
there is a
soon.
need to expand the meaning of art.
Yeah.
There's a need to expand the meaning of art.
Oh yes, of course, of course.
Only then it will work.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
No.
for
It will-
instance,
it
now
will.
our discussion this evening was dominated by the visual.
Yeah.
And there were many more things than visual that was actually.
Yeah, of course. In fact, today
we
are
had
now
word, we had
unfortunately-
movement, we had space, we had many things.
Yeah, I know.
But we just discussed
But
visual.
let me tell you, as an organizer, and I'm not such a bad organizer as you suspect.
No, I'm just saying that if it's going to be, you're saying it'll be based on an artist. And I think that definition of an artist needs to be expanded.
It will include all forms of art, not only visual, but other forms. And we will try to see how it comes about. I mean, it should include architecture, cinema, poetry, and theatre, dance, music. In fact, Vidya was to be here, and unfortunately she fell ill and she could not make it. So otherwise we had provided for music, dance, and visual arts and literature. So there was. But then it's very difficult to find people. There are some people who are reluctant to come and talk, and some people who cannot talk in 15 minutes anyway. So all those problems taken into account, it's much better that we concentrate on an artist, and which will also help Raza Foundation to document that artist. You know, that would create a kind of an archive. And not many occasions are here when an artist. Huh? Yes. No, once in a while we will go back to, if we have such fine speakers, then we'll go back. Yeah.
Every one of you has been really a delight. I understood only part of it. I did not understand everything, but I think it was really marvelous that the 5-6 people together talked about their personal experience of art, and it's a theme, so I think everyone would have enjoyed it.
Yes. No, surely. I'm not saying this will completely replace that. Once in a while, when we are able to put together a brilliant panel like this, we will do it. But I can tell you, it's very difficult to put up brilliant panels. You've had this experience here also. Some of them just completely collapsed, etc. But anyway, we will continue with this, but we'll also bring in the other elements. Thank you very much. And we will be launching next month another journal. Not going to stop us like that. Called Sarmudra, which is devoted, which will be in Hindi, but devoted exclusively to classical music and classical dance. So there is very little of serious writing in Hindi about these. So that will be, you will know about it. And thank you very much.